Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. On today's episode, this will be part of the Radio Giants series. And it's a Radio Giants series because, as you can hear in the background, that is the song Dazed and Confused. Recorded in 1968, released in 1969 by Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, John Bonham, and the legends Led Zeppelin. And so I will be going through, and I guess I'll rank their 8 proper albums from 69 to 79. They do have some other stuff, and it was pretty difficult to rank these, especially, no secret here, the top 6 are all number ones. They're all classics. So I might be able to rank 8 and 7 pretty easily, but once you get to the top 6, you're just picking albums out of a hat at that point to get the ranking. But I'll try and give it a ranking. It's a ranking that will change tomorrow and the next day and so on. But it's really just an excuse to go over these classic albums. And the Radio Giants series, this is the month of November, so this is the 11th one. Next month I'll finish it off, hopefully with a bang, and then we'll be done with the Radio Giants series. But I did want to discuss Led Zeppelin. So here we go. Again, 8 albums. They probably got an album or 2 worth of other stuff, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. My number 8 here was pretty easy to choose, as was the number 7. So we'll just get into it. At number 8, this is their 8th and final proper studio album from 1979. With the paper bag, In Through the Outdoor. Yeah, there we go. This is my cover. I've seen different covers, so I think it's pretty well known that there may have been variations of this cover once you take it out of the paper bag. This album is not a bad album, but it was clearly, when I went to rank these, I was pretty sure this was going to come in at 8. It's different from the others. There's a 3-year gap between albums for the first time in their career. Also, Jimmy Page it's noted, a lot of things I discuss about Led Zeppelin are pretty well known, but Jimmy Page was going through a pretty rough drug addiction on this particular album cycle. So he was kind of not even available for most of it. I want to say John Paul Jones wrote pretty much everything. I don't know if that's true, but I know that he's, In the Evening. It starts with In the Evening. That's a good song. A lot of modern synthesizers on this album that you didn't really hear before. You heard some synthesizers, but it didn't sound quite so modern-y. This album sounds definitely like that. I see Jimmy Page writing credits on here, but you just don't know how much of that was just for publishing reasons. There's nothing, Southbound Suarez was the next song on here. Not a bad song, but just not what I'm looking for when I want to listen to Led Zeppelin. Fool in the Rain's okay. It's all right. That was another hit. Hot Dog is as dumb as it sounds. I never have liked that song. Carousel Ombra, I kind of like it. I'm not sure why it needs to be 10.5 minutes long. And there's a synthesizer keyboard that goes on that's annoying. I wish they would have either dropped that in the mix or just taken it out or replaced it with a different kind of tone. This Carousel Ombra would potentially be the best thing on the album if it weren't for that. And I'm not sure why it needs to be 10.5 minutes. All of My Love, it's kind of a good song. I don't like the chorus, but I think the build-up, like the verse part, is pretty cool. That's got those synths. I'm thinking that's John Paul Jones doing all that sort of songwriting on here. I'm Gonna Crawl, it's okay to end it. So again, this is their 8th of 8 albums, but not a bad album, just a different album. Maybe not what Led Zeppelin fans are looking for particularly, but it did have at least 3 songs I can think of that were on the radio. All of My Love and Fool in the Rain for sure. And even In the Evening, I think, was on the radio a bit. And then you've got if you want the big epic song, you've got the Carousel Ombra. So it's okay. It's okay, but it's the least Jimmy Page-ish album. So it's It's their final, they're on Swan Song Records, but this was their swan song. They just didn't know it at the time. Obviously, John Bonham dies at 80, and that kind of is the end of this band. A band that didn't have lineup changes. It was either those four guys or forget it. So, number 8, you've got In Through the Outdoor. Okay, and coming in at number 7, not a surprise. You go back to their 7th album from '76, and you've got Presence with one of the most ridiculous album covers, as if the paper bag wasn't kind of silly. That album cover in this obelisk thing, is that Storm Thorgerson or Hypnosis or one of those guys doing the cover? I don't know. This album sounds like Led Zeppelin. It sounds a lot like the album that came out right before it. The difference here is the tracks aren't necessarily memorable. And when I was a kid, I was familiar with a lot of Led Zeppelin, all that early stuff, and even some of those hit songs from this album that were on the radio. But I knew nothing of this album for a long time because there are no hits on this album. That doesn't mean it's bad, but you've got, Achilles' Last Stand is great. It's 10.5 minutes long. It's like a progressive metal song for '76. So it starts out with a bang. But then you've got, just a bunch of tracks that, they're not bad, but there's something missing in the production too. There's not enough grit. Maybe it's a little clean. Maybe it's, but For Your Life is okay. Royal Orleans is okay. Nobody's Fault But Mine is a classic. That's a good one. Kind of surprised that wasn't on the radio. Or I could see Achilles' Last Stand not being on the radio, just sheer length of the song. Candy Store Rock, it's okay. Hot Song for Nowhere, T for One though. T for One is a great way to end it. So 7 songs, it's got the 2 long songs that bookend this thing. Actually, T for One isn't, how long is T for One? Yeah, it's a long one. So you got these 2 long songs that bookend the album, and you've got Nobody's Fault But Mine in the middle. Candy Store Rock's okay. I think For Your Life is okay. And it sounds a little bit more Zeppelin-y. Jimmy Page is definitely involved on this one. The production is missing something. It's like a clean production, but it's almost like you wanted a grittier, dirtier production similar to the previous album. And here you just get somewhat less inspired album, not bad, and just not a lot of memorable, songs. And again, it's the one I was the least familiar with for the longest time. But there you go, Presence. And I think just really the reason for this one over In Through the Outdoor is it's a lot more guitar driven, obviously. So a lot more Jimmy Page. Achilles' Last Stand is a classic. T for One's really cool. Nobody's Fault But Mine's a classic. Candy Store Rock, For Your Life, those are okay. Also, I am not necessarily what you would call a fan of the blues. I don't listen to the blues, but they cover a lot of like that Mississippi blues, or the guys from Mississippi that relocated to Chicago and brought that Chicago blues. For some reason, when Led Zeppelin does the blues, I love it. So who knew that I would not really care for blues music, but when Led Zeppelin incorporates it, or when they play it like on T for One or many other songs we'll get to, for some reason I'm a big fan. So there you go, at number 7, their 7th album from '76, Presence. Oh, also apparently Robert Plant was in a nasty car accident, and he was pretty much in a wheelchair for the whole recording of this. So not the easiest of times for him, but whereas Page was struggling on In Through the Outdoor sessions, Plant was a little banged up for this recording session, to say the least. Okay, so it's no secret, the top 6 here are the first 6. Much like Black Sabbath, the first 6 up through 75. The same thing with Led Zeppelin. The first 6 up through 75 are all classics. So this ranking's going to change every day. If I did this show every day for 7 days, this top 6 ranking would change. Kind of knew my number 1, but 2 through 6. I'm looking at why I'm picking this as number 6 today, and I'm already disagreeing with my choice. But coming in at number 6, I'm going to just go with Led Zeppelin 3, their 3rd album from '70. Um, I have nothing but good things to say about this album. Immigrant Song is great. It's just a total heavy metal song. Friends is so cool. It's got this eerie string, these strings that go on through it. Really cool song. Celebration Day is classic. Since I've Been Loving You is a good, slow, bluesy one. Out on the Tiles. Gallows Pole, here's a hint. We may hear it in a sec. That's a great song. Tangerine's pretty cool. Maybe it ends a little quietly with like Run Your R Stomp and a traditional called Hats Off to Roy Harper. But it's a really good album of deep cuts. In fact, I'm ranking it 6, but it's one of those Led Zeppelin albums I'll still reach for when I listen to Zeppelin because I'm not completely burnt out on it. You know, I could listen to that song Friends or Gallows Pole, you know, anytime. Those are just good. I guess those are considered deep cuts. I don't know if Led Zeppelin really has deep cuts. Everybody pretty much knows everything. But just a really cool album, and I was just trying... It wasn't that I picked the 6, I just kept pushing stuff up towards number 1, and this was the one that got kind of bullied back to the back of the pack of these first 6 classic Zeppelin albums where they could do no wrong. And here's Gallows Pole from this album. It's a little bit, it was definitely their acoustic-y album. In fact, I'm thinking, you know, the first 2 albums were not... They had acoustics for sure, but not as heavily as this. And I think after this, they still used acoustics. But this is probably the most acoustic of the albums. But classic album. There's the band at that point. Third album, 1970. Page Plant, John Paul Jones, John Bonham. So there you go. For today, it's coming in at number 6. But what a heck of an album. Oh yeah. CDs, all that good stuff. This could be your number 1. That's where we are basically with Led Zeppelin. That's why they're so legendary. This is ridiculous too. My number 5 is an album just full of classics. This is how hard rock and heavy metal was invented, was with albums like Led Zeppelin 2, 1969 here. I mean... I don't necessarily listen to this album a ton anymore just because whole lot of love. I mean, that riff, that is a massive song. What Is and What Should Never Be, we just heard, great song. The Lemon Song, Thank You's okay. Heartbreakers, just classic. The Lemon Song, if I didn't mention, is classic. Living Loving Maid, She's Just a Woman, that song is great. Ramble On is great. Bring It Home to End It's kind of whatever. Moby Dick is really just an excuse for John Bonham to have a drum solo. So I think, got 9 songs, I think 6 of them are just classics. Whole Lot of Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, The Lemon Song, Heartbreaker, Living Loving Maid, and Ramble On. It's just full of 6 classics. You know, why it's ranked 5th, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's just another classic blueprint of how things are supposed to be done. You know, Black Sabbath showed you how the heavier stuff's supposed to be done with their first 6 as a blueprint. And these first 6 Zeppelin albums are just a complete blueprint too. If I was living in 1973 or 75, obviously I'd be listening to all that progressive rock, but I'd be listening to Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin for sure. Showing me how it's done. So there you go. Today it's number 5. By the way, all of these, other than my number 1, all of these took turns getting as high as number 2 or 3 for sure. So there you go. A classic album, at least 6 absolute classic songs on it. Led Zeppelin 2 from '69. This was my number 1 at one point. I'm not sure why it's a number 4 today. But number 4, I'm going with their debut from '69, recorded in '68. They were really young. It's the debut. There's the Hindenburg. Apparently Robert Plant, I didn't realize how young he was actually. I didn't know that he was 20 when he recorded this in '68. Page was a little bit older. But just they recorded this, I think they had 36 hours of recording time. So they put this together pretty quick. Good Times, Bad Times, absolute classic. Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You, absolute classic. When I was a kid, I think Great White did an MTV Unplugged. I was never a fan of Great White, but they did a really bang-up cover of Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You. which I don't even think Led Zeppelin necessarily wrote it either. But You Shook Me. Again, this is that example of, and this is probably the biggest example of just playing straight up Mississippi blues or that Chicago blues, which was those Mississippi guys, Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters. Born and raised in Mississippi and took their blues up to Chicago. But You Shook Me, again, I don't like blues, but I love it when Led Zeppelin does it, especially on here. That's a Willie Dixon song, Dazed and Confused, absolute classic. Love it. It's so different for them. It's kind of a one-off song. Your Time Is Gonna Come, another great one. Black Mountain Sign's a nice little acoustic piece. I always like it when Jimmy throws in those little 2-minute acoustic pieces. Communication Breakdown, it's like proto speed metal. I Can't Quit You Baby is another Willie Dixon one, and How Many More Times. Sounds like a Willie Dixon song, but it says that the writing credits go to the band here. But really classic, promising debut album. Recorded all the way back in '68, released in early '69, already showing you how it's done. I really don't know why I have it at 4. I think the only reason I'm putting it at 4 today, or trying to reason through, is that there are other albums, and this was the one that was rushed when they were just youngins. It was rushed in 36 hours in the studio and kind of filled up with a lot of blues covers, but who cares? It's an enjoyable listen from beginning to end. So it's coming to number 4, but it feels like an absolute number 1 type classic. So there you go. For today, coming in at number 4 is Led Zeppelin 1, all the way back from '69. So now we get to the top 3. And so I'm sure by process of elimination you can kind of figure out, okay, well he's already ranked the last 2 at the bottom of the list, and he just went through the first 3. So now we're kind of in the middle of their career here. So that's just kind of how I organize the ranking today. My number 1 is definitely my number 1, but coming in at number 3 for today is from 1973. What a great year for music, but it's Houses of the Holy. I just think the first 3 albums are absolutely incredible. There's no doubt about it. It just seems like they're at a level at this point in their career where they're just firing on all cylinders. I will say on this album, this is the first time that Robert Plant starts to change his voice a little bit, and you can hear it on a song like No Quarter, which he sings it completely in a completely different way from the first 4 albums. And by the way, No Quarter, what an interestingly weird song with this little wobbly synthesizer sound. And, whereas Dazed and Confused was kind of a one-off, doomy, Iron Butterfly type song from the first album. No Quarter is kind of a one-off on here, but a really cool track. But the song remains the same, opens it, and it's a classic anthem. The Rain song is one of their most beautiful songs they ever did. So it's kind of a one-off there. So the Rain song is great and unique. Over the Hills and Far Away is absolutely great. The Crunge is probably one of my least favorite tracks on here, but it's still kind of funky with an odd time signature, so it's still good. Dancing Days is great, super catchy. Is it Dire Maker? Not a big fan of that one. It's kind of the reggae one. I mean, we all know it, but I would say that's probably my least favorite just because that style is not what I'm looking for with Led Zeppelin. But again, kudos to Led Zeppelin for trying something different and being successful with it. We talked about No Quarter. The Ocean, a good odd time signature at the end of the album a little bit there on the theme riff. And I think I found out about the song The Ocean through it being a sample on that first Beastie Boys album that I had when I was a kid. And that's another thing. My dad had a lot of these albums, but he didn't have this album when I was a little kid. It didn't come until I was probably a teenager. But, again, because it's Led Zeppelin, you're familiar with a lot of these songs just by listening to the radio. So even the albums we didn't know, and I kind of knew the highlights of. But yeah, this is just a great album. Recorded in '72, released in '73. A lot of songs from this session that didn't end up on here. That we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, so today it's my number 3. I really had a hard time trying to figure out where to put this one too. It's like, is this going to be number 6? Is it going to be number 2? But I just think this is that point in their career where Led Zeppelin are peaking. You know, the middle of their career is where they peaked, I think. At least that's how I'm ranking it today. So there you go. Number 3, this would be their 5th album from '73, Houses of the Holy. Okay. Coming in at number 2, probably their biggest, their crowning achievement album, and I've got Led Zeppelin 4 or Zoso from 1971. I've always called it 4, but it definitely could be. If you said Zoso, we'd know what you were talking about. And you got some lyrics here on the sleeve, but you know, I was going to rate this album lower, but it's not their fault that we never need to hear Black Dog and Rock and Roll ever again. I loved those songs when I was a kid, when I was not burnt out on them. We're listening to the Battle of Evermore, which I have always loved. Stairway to Heaven, surprisingly, I'm not totally burnt out on it, and I still consider it to be Jimmy Page's top 3 guitar solo. Really, the way he maps it out and performs it. You know, Jimmy's been known to be a little loosey-goosey, a little raw, not always the tightest playing, but we like all that grit that he provides. So we don't want him to change that. But on that solo, it's pretty polished. Misty Mountain Hop is great. You know, When the Levee Breaks is classic. So the only 2 songs, you know, Going to California is nice. It's a nice, pleasant, mellow one. Four Sticks is okay. So Four Sticks is probably your least interesting track on here, and it's still not bad. So this is really pretty much just a perfect album. I mean, every song on here is good to great classics. I mean, side 1 is all classic. But if you say, well, the Battle of Evermore didn't hit number 1, 3 of these songs are like number 1s. I think Misty Mountain Hop did pretty well. I think When the Levee Breaks has done well. I see Going to California on compilations. So I think this is, you can kind of say this is their number 1 album in many ways. I've got it at number 2 today, but it's just an absolute legendary album. There you go. I think that's probably related to Lord of the Rings. I know Battle of Evermore is about Lord of the Rings, so. Interesting cover with the beat up stucco and the portrait. So there you go. That will be my number 2 for today, is the legendary, probably their most successful album, Led Zeppelin 4 from '71. And so then there can only be one. I've always loved this album. It's too bad I only have it on CD because I used to have it on vinyl. Why I got rid of it, I have no idea. But you're going with their 6th album from '75, Physical Graffiti, a double album. It's such a double album, it's actually a double disc. They couldn't fit it on one, I guess, 80-minute disc. But this is, the weird thing too is it's a hodgepodge of recordings from different periods of times, and also recordings written in different sessions. So, you know, I think I read Custard Pie is a great one to open it, but The Rover is such a great song, but I think it was written back in 1970 for the Led Zeppelin 3 sessions. In My Time of Dying is a great one, slide guitar. Houses of the Holy was recorded during that session and just not, apparently it wasn't good enough for the Houses of the Holy album. Well, I'm glad they put it on this album because that's a great song. Trampled Underfoot is one of the coolest, I don't know, what is it, a clavinet, whatever that keyboard thing is he's playing. It's a good stomping one. Trampled Underfoot, perfect title for it. The legendary Kashmir. Somehow that's a long song that you do hear on the radio, like Stairway to Heaven. And that's the first disc, or sides 1 and 2. Then you get to In the Light. What a cool, it's like almost Scottish sounding at the beginning. Brown Your R is just one of those great little 2-minute, much like Black Mountainside, it's just a cool little acoustic thing Jimmy does. Down by the Seaside is really mellow, a nice change of pace with a cool guitar effect. 10 Years Gone, what a great song. I think outside of The Rover, I think 10 Years Gone, In My Time of Dying, Trampled Underfoot, Houses of the Holy, yeah, Kashmir, Custard Pie, In the Light, Brown Your R, Down by the Seaside. This album, I remember as a kid, the first 3 sides were perfect. Perfect. And so just right there, it's a perfect three-sided album, which is why it's my number one, because it's got more awesomeness than the other albums, just because it's a longer album, but it's just got more awesomeness. I remember the final side was probably the weakest side, but I think Night Flight's okay. I think the Wanton song is excellent. Best thing on that final side. Boogie with Stu's okay. Black Country Woman, Sick Again to end it. But still, you've got over 80 minutes of music here, probably like 87 minutes of music, and probably 75 minutes of it is excellent. 70 minutes of it. So it's easily a beast of an album, by the way. Wish I had it on vinyl, but it is definitely my number one. So just quickly to re-rank here. At number 8, you've got their 8th album from 79, In Through the Outdoor. Number 7, their 7th album from 76, Presence. And then the top 6, the first 6, so classic. Today I've got Led Zeppelin 3, followed by Led Zeppelin 2, followed by Led Zeppelin 1, followed by Houses of the Holy, followed by 4, followed by Physical Graffiti. Let's see, the other odds and ends. In 82, after John Bonham's death and the band was basically broken up, they did release Coda. I'm a little bummed that while this has, some songs that were not released from different sessions, I wish I had the one with the bonus tracks, because they have Traveling Riverside Blues, which I don't know, from a BBC session in 69. It's too bad that hadn't found its way onto, Led Zeppelin 2 or 3, because it would have fit in there nicely. And then Hey, Hey, What Can I Do? I wish I had that on here. That was a B-side to Immigrant Song, so they really had some good gems from 69, 70 right in there. So Coda, if the 8 proper albums aren't enough, get Coda. I need to get this with the bonus tracks, or find a cheap version of that 1990 box set of Led Zeppelin, which has all those unreleased tracks on that. But I think that's probably still more expensive than getting the deluxe edition of Coda. So that would kind of be your unofficial ninth album collection of stuff. And then I think this was recorded in 73, didn't come out until 76, but The Song Remains the Same. It's their live album. Obviously, if you get the CD, you get an expanded list of tracks. Mine just has the basic stuff, but man, they cram Dazed and Confused onto one side. That live version is so annoying. It goes on way, way, way too long. Yeah, it says 20. I think the version on the CD goes to 29 minutes. Mine's like almost 27 minutes. So they must have edited this down from its original version, but that's just way too long. A 27-minute one side just for a drum solo that would never end, but it's still a nice cover, and that's that classic logo right there. You never see that really on their albums, but you see it right here. But it's, rock and roll, Celebration Day. The Song Remains the Same. Rain Song, beautiful version of Rain Song. Dazed and Confused, No Quarters, Weird Live, Stairway to Heaven, Moby Dick, and Whole Lotta Love. So it sounds like you got two places for John Bonham to go nuts with drum solos here. But a classic album. I bought the movie, The Song Remains the Same. I don't like the movie stuff where Robert Plant's like riding a horse and they're trying to weave a movie into the whole thing, but it's a really cool performance. And again, I ranked Houses of the Holy number 3, Led Zeppelin 4 number 2, and Physical Graffiti number 1. And this video is like kind of right in the prime of their career. They're really at the top of their game, right here. So, but that's just a quick rundown of the legends, total radio giants, Led Zeppelin, who had the 8 proper albums. The classic live stuff from 73, well, released at different times, but on the Houses of the Holy tour, recorded in 73, I think, for the most part. Coda, or these box sets, like the 1990 box set, which contains a lot of these tracks that I hadn't really even been aware of until then. They got a BBC Sessions, which is really cool. How the West Was Won was like a live thing from 72, that's pretty good. and a whole bunch of other things. And I saw Martin Popoff say this before, but we need someone to just go in as a curator and just find all these like one-off awesome live performances of like all these cool deep tracks and everything, and just put it together in one cool 4-disc box set or something like that. But even if that doesn't happen, we do have a lot to work with here. So, but I think that will do it. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.